All right, hello everyone. Welcome to this candidate forum. I'm Ty Edwards with the Executive Committee of Women for Kansas, and this is a candidate forum for the Women for Kansas Lawrence Douglas County chapter. As I'm sure many of you know, this week, top of many of our minds is the role of violence, unfortunately, in our politics and our nation. We should live in a nation where you can gather with your friends, you can go to school, you can go to work, you can go to political rallies, and do so safely. Unfortunately, that is not the case. The mission of Women for Kansas is to recruit, motivate, and educate women who will actively participate in electing moderates to public office who will advocate for moderate policies. And one of those moderate policies that is one of our legislative priorities is responsible gun laws. So for Women for Kansas, gun violence is a public health emergency in our country, and this is an example that we're unfortunately still having to face. And we look forward to more moderate politicians passing more policies related to this issue that unfortunately is plaguing our politics and our lives today. All right, that being said, let's move on to the folks we are going to have with us today. So we are so excited and grateful for the folks who are with us today as part of the Kansas Senate District Number 2 Democratic Primary Forum. This district covers most of Lawrence, except for portions of West Lawrence and Northwest Lawrence. Unfortunately, I have been redistricted out of this district, which makes me deeply sad. Perhaps that will mean I have an impartial opportunity as we go through this forum. A couple of things about the order of events. So the purpose of this forum is to educate voters about candidates seeking office in the Kansas legislature. I'm going to briefly introduce our candidates, and then we will transition to questions. And we ask our candidates to be specific in your responses, especially because this is a primary forum, and a lot of times the gap, right, in terms of issues between primary candidates is not very big. So the more specific you can be, the better. We are also fortunate in Lawrence to have multiple organizations in our community that host candidate forums, and we have multiple local news outlets that cover these events and candidates, which not all of our friends throughout the state can say. So I want to encourage everyone to check out our local news sources of the Lawrence, Kansas Times and the LJ World to learn more about both these candidates and other candidates that are running for office. There are voter guides and wonderful resources at both of those places. And just think about this is just one tool, right, in educating yourself before you're voting, and there are more. Also, because there are other ways you can engage with these candidates, we're hoping that today's forum provides perhaps a different perspective on these candidates that can help voters understand their choices before voting in the primary election. After the forum, we will post this video on the Women for Kansas YouTube channel. That will be done this weekend. And I will say one of the things we're excited to do in this forum is we think we might have time for audience questions at the end of the forum. So if you would like to pose a question, feel free to post it at any time in the Q&A at the bottom of your Zoom screen. And if we have time at the end of the forum, we will try to get to those questions. Another thing I want to make sure everyone knows that you want to get out and vote. Early voting in Douglas County starts tomorrow, which is part of why we're doing this today. So that starts tomorrow, July 17th. You can vote early in Douglas County up until the day before Election Day, and then of course you can vote on Election Day. If you want to learn more about where you can do this and what times, you should go to dgcoks.gov. Click on voting and elections, and then click on ways to vote. And mostly that means you can definitely go to the election office at 23rd in Louisiana and vote most business hours. Okay, so let me briefly introduce our wonderful candidates. So Christina Haswood is with us. Christina's campaign website is haswoodforkansas.com. And Christina is a graduate of Haskell Indian Nations University and KU Med Center. She has a background in public health and has served in the Kansas House of Representatives since 2020. I believe Women for Kansas and I were part of a candidate forum right when you were running for that first office. So that was the first time I got to meet Christina. So thank you for that. Christina has been a leader in advocating for women's issues and for policies impacting tribal nation members, among many other issues. Our other candidate today is Marci Francisco. Her campaign website is marcifrancisco.wordpress.com. Marci's background is in architecture and worked for KU in facilities and planning and for the Center for Sustainability. She was elected to the Lawrence City Commission and has served as Lawrence's mayor. And she has been in the Kansas Senate since 2004. And I think maybe since then I have lived in your district, which now I, of course, am no longer, unfortunately. So, Marci has also been a leader in advocating for women's issues, the environment, and education, also among many other issues in her time in the legislature. And I, as both Women for Kansas and as a resident of Lawrence, want to thank both of you for your generosity and sharing your time and expertise with Women for Kansas, both virtually and at many of our in-person events over the years. And we really appreciate that. And it has always been very impactful and very relevant to us and our members when you've shared that. So thank you so much. Okay, so we are going to transition to questions. So this first question, we're going to start with you, Christina. So first off, this should be a nice way to start. Why should voters in Senate District 2 vote for you in this primary election?
Thank you so much for having us here this evening, and hello to everybody. My name is Christina Haswood. I am running to bring my lived experiences to the state senate. I'm a renter of an apartment. I work multiple jobs just to try to make ends meet. I hold student loan debt, which are not just unique to myself, but to many Kansans across our state. Yet we don't have a state senator currently who holds all these lived experiences while shaping our state policy. I feel like this lived experience, this working class experience, is severely lacking in our state senate, and it's painful to watch from the Senate or from the House side. And I think that it's just a valuable voice, a valuable representation that needs to be in our state senate while we're shaping our policies, while we are creating policies, and also when we're having these conversations. And our colleagues need that type of education as well to why these issues are important. I'm of the millennial generation, and I feel like, a lot of our struggles include trying to find affordable housing, a lot of my peers are trying to find affordable childcare. And a lot of my peers are also moving out of state as well, which is a bipartisan concern of how do we keep these young talent in our state of Kansas. And I think we can do that through looking upstream through public health policies, but also how do we support our small and local businesses to keep our state and our community more desirable for folks to plant roots, to plant families, and to plant their future here. I know Lawrence is really exciting. I feel a lot of the economic benefits from Kansas City. The biggest thing that a lot of my folks are excited about is the World Cup. And how do we, even though it's not in Lawrence, I feel like Lawrence does get a little bit of that excitement, but I want to make sure that our small local businesses are thought of during these processes. But not only that, our marginalized folks who own businesses, women-owned businesses, veteran-owned businesses, people of color owned businesses as well. So that's just a little bit about me and why I'm running for the seat. And yeah.
Awesome. Thank you, Christina. So, Marci, why should voters in Senate District 2 vote for you in this primary election? Oh, no, you're muted. You're muted.
Trying to be good.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. So I actually was elected in 2004 and started serving in 2005. And there's an easier website, marciforsenate.com. But I'm guessing many of you already know me and my husband, Joe. We've been active in the community, shopping, and Joe playing music at the farmer's market, rehabbing properties to provide affordable housing in Lawrence, and being involved with a variety of community organizations. So I'm a member of this community. And I'm proud of my record and service to my constituents in Lawrence and Douglas County. So I've got a reputation for paying attention to the details, working with other senators to build consensus, and getting good bills and amendments passed. So just this afternoon, I got a message from KDADS, the Kansas Department of Aging and Disability Services, that they adopted 2 changes that I proposed in rules and regulations for the crisis intervention centers. Okay, One was just changing the word or to and. But that will mean that the treatment plan being reviewed is at least daily and at the conclusion of somebody's time in the crisis intervention center. And I think the rest of my fellow legislators said, good catch. So the other thing is the KDADs had suggested requirements for tuberculosis testing because this is a congregate site. And here's the deal. You're only in a crisis intervention center for 72 hours, and it takes that long to get the information back. So actually somebody who's paying attention to the details can catch some of the things, makes a really helpful change because it's a time-consuming process once we've adopted things. So I think that will help.
Awesome. All right. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. So moving on to question 2. So Marci, we're going to have you go first on this one. What do you see as the primary difference between you and your Democratic opponent, Christina, in this primary?
Probably experience in relationships. So some more time in the Senate, and certainly the opportunity to have relationships with both the governor. She and I came in the same year in 2005, but also knowing those individuals that you're going to be working with. So we have 2 more years of Governor Kelly's administration, and I want to make the best of them. I also know that, and certainly appreciate Representative Haswood's background and lived experience, but if your lived experience is working with renters and individuals, young people who are trying to get started, we voted differently on the tax plan. I think she voted for it. I voted against it. That tax plan rewards higher income individuals. It rewards older individuals. And Senator Holland and I proposed an alternative that would have focused more and given 3 times the amount of property tax relief, would have doubled the amount of child care relief. And those are the issues that I think can best help those younger, just getting started families.
Okay, Christina. So what do you see as the primary difference between you and your Democratic opponent, Marci, in this primary?
Yeah, I think the lived experience is, again, severely lacking in our state Senate. You know, when I look at the demographics of this district, majority are of the age of 30. Many folks make under $50,000 or less. I was born and raised here in Lawrence. I'm a proud product of our USD 497 public schools. I am from the community. The community raised me. And, you know, I think having all this as well would be beneficial to the state Senate. Somebody who is fighting for issues while also, you know, going through these issues as well. I feel like it's really hard sometimes. I know before I got into politics, I'm very new to politics. You know, the first door I knocked was my first campaign. I always thought that my vote didn't matter, my voice didn't matter. And I remember looking at people who represented me about 5 years ago. No one looked like me. And I've been very happy at the diversity that our community has decided to elect folks at the local level. I know we're still working at that federal level though. But I remember, you know, just my one question I would always ask elected officials: what about Native American policy? And I remember the previous seat holder to the House, she was like, "Oh, good question. I don't know." And Representative former Eileen Horn actually changed my opinion about politicians. I thought that they didn't care. And, you know, I always try to lead with that of empathy. And I think having folks in the state Senate who go through these issues, who know these issues, would be a valuable piece to have and that valuable knowledge. I'm Native American, and one of the things, I'm currently the only Native American elected official in our state legislature, and just having this knowledge and background has been beneficial both on the House and Senate side. I've only been in the House for the past 4 years, and I know it's a very short amount of time, but I'm very proud of the accomplishments I've created. In my first year, former state legislator Pankwe Victor's Kozad took me under her wing, which it can be quite rare to find such amazing mentorship in the legislature, and asked me to help her get a bill across. It was a Missouri Indigenous Peoples bill, and she taught me the process all the way up. Building that bench is something that we really lack in our legislature, and getting that bill passed my first year was amazing. And I didn't realize how rare of an opportunity that was to get something done. And I was so grateful that she introduced that bill before I got there. And she introduced me to the relationships and how this process works. Fast forward to this year, my 4th year in the legislature, I got to work on the Indian Child Welfare Act, which was on the chopping block at the federal level last year. And I remember working with tribal governments and partners, and I was like, we got to do something. Like, I cannot sleep at night if we don't introduce something. And a lot of folks were like, we're not there yet, Christina. I was like, okay, well, I'm going to introduce something just in case. And seeing, this background and this knowledge, and, in the past 4 years, getting to pass the gaming compacts as well, and to provide that expertise on federal state affairs and health human services. That is such a valuable knowledge that I bring to the table, and my public health background as well. And fighting on those front lines of health and human services. I think me and Senator Francisco have a very similar voting record, but the difference is what my lived experiences are, and how do I lead, how do I, contribute to policies and discussions in committee. And I am always excited and happy to learn. I know there's so much left to learn in this job, and just to have the opportunity to build off of the work I did in the House and the Senate would be such an amazing opportunity, and to represent my community there.
Awesome. Thank you, Christina. Okay, I'm going to have you start then on this next one, Christina. So why are you the candidate that will not only win this primary, but also the general election against the Republican challenger that this race also has in November?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'll share a little story. This was always a question when I first ran in 2020. Christina, you're a Democrat in a supermajority. How are you going to get anything done? And it was definitely that relationship building. When I got elected, I didn't have a general opponent. And during that time, I started to build connections. We had these community conversations with our local labor, with our public school entities, with youth in politics. We even had a part 1, part 2, and just building all this connection and this coalition from grassroots level. And then after that, after the general election, I got postcards, and I wrote every Republican House member, said, "Hi, my name is Christina Haswood. I just got elected. I look forward to working with you." And it actually became a conversation starter piece in the freshman orientation, which is basically half a day. That's pretty much all they give you in the legislature. And I got to build a lot of conversations there, and it established a reputation of, oh, this is Christina Haswood. Even though she believes in X, Y, and Z, and she's from Lawrence, she is kind enough to introduce herself and to, push the politics aside, and just meet someone respectfully as person to person. I have had the great opportunity to work with some of our most conservative legislators all the way out in Western Kansas on issues that of legislation, and have conversations with, and how can we better create policy. And with this race, there is a Republican opponent. And I think I'm the best candidate because, I've also came off of another primary when I first ran for office in 2020. I think I'm very proud of my campaign. of getting the word out, of trying to get as many folks involved. This evening we had a meet and greet and we had a free meal. That's something I always try to do, is try to bring folks together, tell them, you know, about this whole politics thing, tell them about this whole voting thing. Because it wasn't too long ago that I was in their shoes, that I felt like my voice didn't matter. I didn't even know about ksvotes.org. I didn't even know where the election office was. And so I think, you know, that part of me and that community grounded in values will help me if I were to win in this primary, to successfully defeat the Republican, and just to work with partners all around.
Great. Marci, why are you the candidate that will not only win the primary, but also the general against the Republican challenger?
Because I've throughout the years faced a Republican challenger, and in fact was the first Democrat elected to Senate District 2 in maybe 20 years. So I know people, I connect with them. They often know me. You've seen my yard signs out. So I think that I can continue to make a message that it makes sense in this case. I think the one concern would be, do we need to have a Republican because they're the majority party? And we want to make sure we can have a voice and get something done. But I think my record shows that even as a Democrat, I've been able to do that. So I know, Christina, you had given us some ideas about questions, and she also talked about relationships. Is that going to be another question, or do you want me to?
Well, kind of. I mean, both of you have sort of segued to what my next one is here. So I think this is going to, piggyback off of what you just said. So Marci, I'll have you go first on this. So Democrats, as you both talked about, are currently the minority party in the Kansas legislature, which is controlled by a Republican supermajority. And how have you been effective as a minority party member in influencing and enacting policies in the Kansas legislature? So Marci, can you start us on that?
Sure. My strategy actually started with knowing where others are coming from. I've been really lucky in terms of background, because I've been president of the League of Women Voters of Kansas, president of the Kansas Preservation Alliance, president of the Kansas Grassroots Art Association. So when I was asked if I'd ever been to Smith Center, I could reply, oh, yes. I was there with members of the Kansas Preservation Alliance working on the bank building at 4th and Main. When someone asks me, have I been to Newton? I say, oh, I love the monument to Turkey red wheat. So, and even one time when we were on the arts and culture tour, another senator was so proud of the water tower at Beaumont, and she said, look, we got a certificate from the Kansas Preservation Alliance. And then she noticed that my signature was on that certificate because I had been president and signed it. So knowing those things. And also, I try to learn about the issues that other legislators are addressing in their communities. We, in many ways, are lucky in Lawrence in terms of having a university, a district attorney, a lot of investment from the state. So I try to take the time to listen to them. And when I know that others have a local League of Women Voters, I ask if they've heard from those individuals about a particular topic. Are you hearing the same things I'm hearing? And so, again, I'm proud of my voting record, but even more of my reputation for reading the bills and knowing the details. Other legislators are more interested when you can offer information and positive suggestions. And because of that, sometimes they'll come to me and say, okay, would you take a look at this? Because they know that I'm really working with them for the best policy we can get for our state.
Awesome. Okay, Christina, just to say it again. So, Democrats are the minority party, right? Republicans supermajority. How have you been effective as a minority party member in influencing and enacting policies?
Yeah, so definitely tying back to just creating relationships. And this is actually a common question I feel like we get a lot from high schoolers and middle schoolers. So like, oh my goodness, how can you work with those people? And I'm like, oh, they're just like normal. Like once you run into them in the hallways or you run into them at one of the free lunches lines in the Capitol, you're like, hi, how are the kids doing? How are the grandchildren doing? And just coming at each other with respect. Um, and, building those relationships. And I mentioned my Indian Child Welfare Act bill. That was something I felt like I talked about ever since I got to the legislature. And that took 3 years to build those relationships and to work with the chairperson and to work not only with the Republican leadership on that issue, but on my Democratic side as well, to have folks there to advocate on my behalf if I'm not at the table for these things. I think a lot of it is, taking opportunities. So we get a lot of requests to go across the state, especially as a Democrat. There's Democrats outside of Lawrence, all the way out in Western Kansas. And I've had the wonderful opportunity to go to like Ellis County, Hayes, Kansas, and I've done the Bunker Hill PBS show. I think 2 or 3 times. And I've done it with Representative Susan Kincannon. And I remember at first I was like, oh my God, a Republican, like, oh, like I was just like, and everyone's like, no, she's cool. I was like, oh, okay, cool. And we had a wonderful conversation. And I think that was what blossomed to allow me to get that bill hearing, just to establish that trust. Being on the agriculture committee, I know Senator Francisco, the agriculture committee is like the coolest committee. And I was on there my first year. And that has taken me across the state. It has shown me all the way from Western Kansas to Central Kansas, North Kansas to South Kansas. And coming into these other legislators' home areas and, making it a point to be like, hey, I'm here, or, going to their farms. I've had a pleasure of going to some of my colleagues' ranches. And, I think it's a fair criticism. I don't own cattle. I don't know what that life is like. And when we're talking about an issue that might impact them, then it gives me a lot more of a perspective when we are debating this issue. Because I know coming from, Native American background, I don't see folks at powwows or at Native American events or at Haskell. So I'm like, I remember just being like, especially as a student there, like I would have loved to see an elected official there and be like, oh, this is why, the Native American population, X, Y, and Z, or like with casinos, it's not all about getting revenue. They're giving revenue to fund their healthcare system and to fund their physicians that they have to, travel so long ways for. It's just not at the surface level of these issues. It's more of like, how can you gather an understanding? But yeah, building these relationships, and they do take years, building a sense of respect and trust. I've, worked with some of the most conservative members in the legislature. And this one kind of bite me in the butt, but when I was on Health and Human Services, I had an amendment to run. There was that anti-abortion bill where they wanted to add a bunch of more questions. And I sit next to Representative Bryce, who is a big champion on their side. And I said, hey, I want to try and work with you all. I'm going to run this amendment. Let me know what you think. And I sent it to him, and I sent the bill draft to some of the pro-life folks. They didn't get back to me, but I think it was the attempt of trying to work together and saying like, hi, I am definitely on the other side of this issue as a pro-choice person. How can we work together? And sometimes like folks just don't want to work with you, but I think it's just a willingness of keep trying and keeping that conversation open, and trying to find opportunities to work together. I'm a part of the Future Caucus in the legislature, which is legislators under the age of 45, I believe. And in my first year, we got to pass a first-time homebuyers bill, and I was like, still trying to, figure out where the restrooms are. But I was like, I like this issue. This is probably not the, the best solution to get to it, but I'm excited that we're talking about this. This is really exciting. So finding spaces in that way to talk about those tough issues. And I've seen with the issues of guns, there's folks who are pro and folks who want common sense. And I've seen in just this safe space created in the legislature, conversations being had and respect being drawn and given. I think it's definitely earned and not given. So yeah, those are just a few ways that I try to build relationships with our Republican colleagues, and try to come and create a compromise. Sometimes we don't get everything perfect. I know the past tax bill was a compromise, and so that's something I've been learning, and it's very tough to definitely be like, we want X, Y, and Z. But I wanted to respect what the House and the Senate and the governor's agreements were to get folks relief as soon as possible.
Awesome, thanks. Okay, so you've had a chance in both this forum and other forums to mention different issues, that are important, or you've probably gotten a sense from the moderators and other people in the community what the important issues are to them. What issues do you think are very important to address in the next legislative session or in your next term that you think people are not talking about, or are not maybe the ones that get the most attention but are very consequential? Marci, do you want to start us off on that one?
I can. So, and I particularly appreciate you're not saying 2 or 3 issues that are the most important, because I think one thing that's really important to remember is we are representing all our constituents, and some of them have an issue that make a huge difference to them, so you don't want to just be very narrow in terms of the things that you're addressing. So I think that we certainly want to work on healthcare and Medicaid expansion. I think there's 2 issues on that I want to add to the discussion. One is maternal health care, particularly for women of color, because I think we have not seen the data. The Department of Health and Environment says some of it might be too specific by county, but we need to understand that there is a difference in opportunities, and make sure that we're addressing that. So here we're spending money on pregnancy centers that may even delay an opportunity for women to get the healthcare they need. So I worked, I guess, beginning of not this year, but the year before, to review all our statutes on abortion. And I really am pleased that the Kansas Supreme Court has addressed some of those. I think the one part we've left out of that is the opportunity for insurance for abortion care, because really, many times this is a situation where it's the health of the mother, or it could be a situation of rape. Are we really saying insurance shouldn't cover that health care or be available? I was always told you could get a rider for abortion care. And so I went to Legislative Services and asked to sign up for that, and they never could find a company that had it. So anyway, I think we're going to be looking at public education. I had not realized, we've talked about the Gannon case, and certainly the governor has done her best to fully fund education. I had not realized that the Gannon case, because it was started in the 2010-2011 session, when the state was funding 92% of the cost of special education wasn't in that. So let's bring that back. I want to provide some oversight for the state water plan implementation. We've seen more money for that. We need to expand the state energy office. It's a half-time person. And with a lot of funding coming from the federal government, we should make sure it's a robust person. I'd like to see us adopt state building codes for energy efficiency. You know, we talk a lot about affordable housing. If utilities aren't affordable, housing isn't affordable. Anyway, I think I'll deal with those. And then, I want to make sure that we don't allow seeds that have been covered with is it niconide? So that you don't want to put a pesticide on a seed that becomes part of that plant and kills pollinators.
I got you. That was nice. Yeah, nice list. Okay, so Christina, what are some of the issues that you are focused on for the next session or the next term that you think don't get a lot of attention or that people aren't paying attention to?
Yeah, so I think, there's just so many issues, and this is a unique question. I don't think we've gotten this question before. I want to touch back into Native American Indigenous issues. So I try to introduce one or two pieces each year. And again, I'm working on the Indian Child Welfare Act. It's currently, it got a hearing this session, and it's currently in Judicial Council review, which I was like, what does that mean? It's going to be looked at by the Kansas Judicial Council Review Board here in the next couple weeks. And then throughout this process, I think it's going to take a year or so. Judges who actually work on tribal cases, Indian child welfare cases, will be able to give a recommendation on how to proceed forward with this type of legislation. And Kansas is one of the states here in the Midwest. I believe Nebraska has one, Oklahoma has one. And seeing that Kansas doesn't have one was very concerning. I remember my first year, I had a constituent who was Native American here, and she was having issues regarding that process. So seeing how that is very much needed, and seeing in the committee process too, when these Indigenous bills do get introduced, my colleagues are just like, what's going on? And a lot of education is needed there. And another really awesome thing that I'm working on is I'm on the Indigenous Education Work Group, which was recently approved by the Kansas State Board. I'm a non-voting member of that board, but I have learned so much about the treaty rights of Indigenous folks and children, and what can we do more with tribal nations in our public education schools. Coming from Lawrence, we have a Native American Student Success Center, which we are very lucky to have. Lawrence has historically had a great leadership in that office. And I remember going to school here and getting my school supplies, getting my voucher to get my free basketball shoes and volleyball shoes. I was like heartbroken to know that other, areas of our state don't have such a robust Native American Student Success Center. So I was like, how can we help improve that? And the work group has been looking at giving recommendations for data, education data, accessibility. I'm learning a lot here in the public education space. It's a very, very hard topic, very, very hard profession to do. So, that was something that we were looking at the horizon to do. And we have that in research currently, and just trying to see if we can exhaust all options before going to the legislature with these types of policy solutions. But a lot of tribal leaders want to know where their enrolled members, the little enrolled members are, and they want to know where they are, and that can also lead to funding as well, which can help provide that funding to our public schools for our Native and Indigenous children. A couple of issues that I feel passionate about that I've been trying to dig a little deeper into is renters and tenant rights. Every year as a renter, our rent increases. And I feel like every year during this time, I'm like, this is my first apartment, so I don't really know what are my rights are. So talking to some community advocates and seeing proposed policy solutions. And another thing that's really concerning in our community is that sometimes like corporations out from California or Texas come and buy these large properties. And most recently, there was a trailer park here in town that this big corporation came and built. And then we're hearing from the community that these folks who live here have, like a month to move out. And it's like, okay, how did we get here and how can a state help? And following with that, and at the doors too, I've been hearing a lot of homelessness and houselessness issue. Although I feel like a lot of that groundwork can be done more at the local level, I feel like there still has to be a state level solution. And this past year, I was working with our city government here in the city of Lawrence, and they had a policy recommendation for folks who are experiencing houselessness and homelessness who come into our community, and we don't know who they are and when they're coming. And the issue is that they're not getting matched up to services. So I think that is an issue that we can all agree on from whatever spectrum you are in, that folks who need help and services, we should try and match them up as soon as possible. But the issue with that is we had a bill draft, and I was working with the city and I was working with advocates as well. But we just ran out of time. So that's another issue that I hope to try and build on. And was very proud to try and bring those voices and parties together. We were just getting tripped up on the language. So just needed more time on that. And then I think public transportation is really exciting. There was something going around, I think, this past legislative session to add more to, I'm forgetting what it's called, but it was like going from like Wichita to Oklahoma. And we have the Amtrak here. So I think public transportation is exciting. I would love to be less car dependent. And, especially commuting to Topeka during session, I'm just like, I wish I could just sit on like a metro or a light rail. So I feel like we don't talk a lot about public transportation. And that is, just because of the legislature we have, that is not quite their cup of tea. So I think if we can talk a little bit more of that, and especially with the big economic projects coming from the Kansas City area, the World Cup, Panasonic, the possibility of having a professional sports team. If I were to go and enjoy a Taylor Swift concert, I would like to have a good time and I don't want to drive. So I think public transportation would be amazing. That is my dream. And those are just a few, I think, that don't give a lot of time and spotlight in our legislature.
Awesome. Thank you. That was very educational for both of you. I appreciate it. All right, Christina, I'm going to have you go first on this one as well. And then we'll see if we have any from our audience. Okay, so this is a little bit complicated. All right, so the outcome of this primary election will ultimately lead to one of you no longer remaining in the Kansas legislature. And frankly, I find this to be a devastating loss for the entire state. We need more competent and effective women in the Kansas legislature, not less. So how do you reckon with this reality as part of this campaign? So Christina, you want to start me off?
Yeah. Thank you so much for that question. I am excited because, that is unfortunately the risk that we're taking here in a primary, but I think it's a risk well worth it. I am excited to, pass the torch on to the new House District 10 legislator candidate. I'm so excited for Susan Weichel. She's going to be amazing. I think her lived experience of being a mother with young kids. We don't have a lot of legislators who are moms, yet alone who have a child in childcare and who have a child in the public school system. So I think that value of that lived experience and expertise in a legislator is going to be like very much needed. And, I think having that and building the bench and passing the torch is a part of this process. With the possibility of not being in the legislature, there's always other ways to get involved. And, one of my many jobs, I work in the climate space. Another part of my job, I work in the communication space here in Kansas. And just like you all watching here today, if you're not an elected official, there are so many ways to still be involved in Kansas politics without being an elected official. And at the state level, I feel like at the local level, there's a lot of opportunity to see those changes a lot more quickly. There's so many, City of Lawrence, Douglas County boards and commissions. I used to be on the Human Relations Commission, and those voices and perspectives are very much needed. So it's really great to, branch yourself out a little bit, and grow and take on maybe more of a volunteer role in that capacity. But I'm very excited that, either way, I think we'll have, we're taking care of on House District 10. But, there's other ways to stay involved, and continue to work on the issues as well. And definitely the risk I took while running for office here.
Awesome. I guess it's always risky, right? Yeah. Okay, Marci, how do you reckon with the reality that we're going to lose someone awesome?
I had this position. I feel like I had done a good job. But I have a challenger. And, some of the things I'm hearing are things that I can also easily address. So certainly I've served on the Housing and Credit Counseling Board. So I understand tenant landlord law and am in a position to address that. I have been involved in the Rail Caucus, so supporting the Heartland Flyer, and I absolutely believe we want, public transportation. So, but again, as Representative Haswood commented, there are other ways to be involved. So I wasn't in a position to be able to run for her seat because I don't live in her district. So, and someone had already announced for Representative Heiberger's seat. So the choice I think I was given is to try to persuade people I've done a good job, that Representative Haswood is younger and she can still get back in.
Awesome. Well, thank you for that. I think that maybe our Q&A function on this webinar isn't working. I'm not seeing it down below. If anyone can put a question in the chat, we'll see if we can get anybody's questions. I'm not sure if that appears on the attendee end. So I don't know if Zoom is letting the whole team down. You know how it can do that sometimes. So are there any parting thoughts or anything else that you didn't get a chance to address that either one of you would like to add?
I'll just say thanks so much to Women for Kansas for hosting this event, for being very clear about your positions and what's important to Kansans across the state, and letting us have this opportunity to share with those members and others who might find this on YouTube.
That's awesome. Any parting thoughts, Christina?
I just want to say thank you so much for doing this. I think forums are really great, and getting the voters more information on candidates. Like I tell folks, whoever you decide in this election will be good, will be safe. I think we both represent our community extremely well, and I think all the folks who are helping on the either campaigns as well. It's just really nice to see during these hard times what we're seeing at the national level, to see democracy come together, and folks exercising that. And just want to say the questions were amazing. I think you asked a couple really interesting questions that we haven't gotten yet in these forum capacities. So thank you so much for turning my brain a little bit. And if folks have any questions, again, the chat, and feel free to reach out to me if you have any specific questions as well.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you for that. Yes, I also want to reiterate that in Women for Kansas, we like to say that the way all voters should think about election season is you either are the candidate or you are supporting the candidate. I'm confident both of our candidates would appreciate your funds or your time or both to help them in their campaign, both to the primary and possibly to the general. Some other things we want to make sure you know is Women for Kansas would also welcome your support as well. You can go to womenforkansas.org and click on membership and support. We also have a weekly newsletter called News We Can Use, and we are on many of the social media platforms if you'd like to follow us there. Again, the most important thing these candidates need is for you to vote, right? So early voting starts tomorrow. Again, you can look up early voting at dgcoks.gov, click on voting in elections, and then ways to vote. You can also vote in person on August 6th, which is the primary election date. And we encourage all of you to also not forget about, right, this same seat in the general election, right? So there's an election in August, but there's also a Republican challenger, and there will be another election you'll need to vote for in November. Women for Kansas also wants to say that we're working on planning another candidate forum. We're not sure whom with yet on August 17th, so stay tuned for more information when we figure out who's going to be at that one, and we hope to do several before the November election. So again, thank you all for joining us. Thank you, Marci and Christina, and everyone. Have a wonderful rest of your summer. Yep, bye.
3